The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
On this week's show, we welcome back United States Congressman Dan Meuser of the 9th Congressional District. As Dan has been one of our most frequent guests, we will skip over his resume and educational accomplishments and skip right to his public service, which began in 2011. When Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett nominated Dan to serve as Pennsylvania's Secretary of Revenue. While there, Dan significantly reformed the department to increase efficiencies. Dan's leadership was recognized by the Council on State Taxation for having the most dramatic improvement of any Department of Revenue in the country. Dan's public service continued when he was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 2018, and he was reelected in 2020 to a second term by a large margin. In Congress, Dan serves on two very important committees, among others. The two I'm mentioning are Small Business and Foreign Affairs. Very importantly, he was recently appointed to serve on the Border Security Caucus, and we all know how important that is with the immigration issue we face in this country. He has also played a key role in what became known as the Problem Solvers Caucus to generate bipartisan support to get legislation through Congress. On today's show, we will be discussing the recent passage by the United States House of Representatives, President Biden's $2 trillion reconciliation bill. Of course, Democratic spin doctors gussied it up into the misleading Build Back Better bill. Of course, that description would have been more appropriate to the recently passed infrastructure bill. Instead of Build Back Better, the bill should have been called what it really is, the Green New Deal. The bill is really a social welfare bill and a climate change bill. We will be discussing in depth Congressman Meuser's opposition to that bill and the issue it presents for this country, as inflation is at 40-year highs and the economy is in difficult shape as we head into what I've described as a nuclear winter, with energy bills and gasoline prices being more than most middle-class families can afford.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Dan, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Great to be here again, Chuck.
As I've said to many of our guests when we're not on Skype or on Zoom, it's a pleasure to have people in studio close together, shaking hands and maskless and all good stuff.
Agreed.
But you just left Congress, and if I'm saying this correctly, you were on the floor of the House of Representatives from Thursday night till 5 a.m. Friday morning. Got 2 hours of sleep, give or take, and then were called back for the vote. You, of course, voted no to that bill, have strong opinions about it. You issued a press release that went out all over the national wire. So you voted no, and talk about why.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Thursday night. It was quite an evening. It was funny about it. I started at about 8:30 or so in Kevin McCarthy's office, and I ended up walking with him to the House floor.
That's the minority leader for our vote, right?
Yes. And what was interesting is my daughter happened to be with me, and I let her sit in the cloakroom right outside the House floor because she can't go on the floor. And I said, don't worry, I'll be back in about 25 minutes. I think Kevin's going to speak, the minority leader, for 25 minutes. And he got going, and he actually expected to speak for about 45 to 55 minutes. He didn't tell anybody about this, that the other plan could be a lot longer. And because of the catcalls and because of the other things that were being ejected at him from the other side of the aisle.
The Democrats.
He just kept on going. And after 2 hours, after 3 hours, they started bringing him in some new material. And like you said, he stayed there for over 8 hours, a new House floor record, by the way.
Wow.
And yes, I was with him till 5 a.m. And Nancy Pelosi did a couple of things. She actually turned off the air conditioning on the floor.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So that was done. And then called the vote. Usually when the House convenes, it's 8 a.m., but the votes are about an hour and a half later. Anyway, we had votes at 8:15 just to sort of get back to us. And there's a real important reason he did this, though, not just for show, to do everything possible to inform the American people what's in this bill, because they're not going to like it. Okay, I think 80% of America won't like what they see in this so-called build back baloney, build back worse.
Green New Deal.
Build back on the backs of American business, because
And working people.
It disincentivizes work, it increases inflation, it minimizes production, it will certainly continue to choke our supply chain. All those things will be the results of the provisions within this bill. And and that's why it was important for Kevin and all of us, and that's why I'm glad to be here right now to inform the American people what's in it. And also say, hey, it's not over yet. Even though it passed the House, there's a still chance that we can defeat it.
Right. Well, a couple comments. Your prospects for defeating it have gone up exponentially. First of all, United States Senator, Democratic centrist United States Senator Joe Manchin has said recently that with runaway inflation and the havoc it's wreaking on our economy, that any thought of trillions of new stimulus money coming in, when we've put about 6 or 7 trillion in going back to last year already, a lot of it unfunded, Dan. He's pretty much said he's not going to consider anything till next year. And so on the timeline of it, my feeling is that by the time next year comes, which is only a few months away, next year includes January, we turn to 2022. What I see happening is that what I've called nuclear winter is coming for people who are not going to be able to afford their energy bills. They're up 300 or 400%. I don't have to tell people what's going on at the gasoline pump. I just saw a wonderful little editorial cartoon, and it's a cartoon drawing, and there's 2 people coming in, and one of them says that we're not going to be able to afford to put food on our table for Thanksgiving. And the man says that to the wife who just went shopping. And the wife retorts back, oh yeah, I was able to get a full shopping bill. And of course the man said, well, I didn't think we could afford it. She said, well, I had to sell the table. So they got the food and there's no table to put it on.
Right.
That's what's going on in this country.
Or a couple
right
of
now.
can of peas. Oh, I know. My wife was in the supermarket yesterday. A woman at the front of the line was very upset that her turkey cost about $55, $56, and people actually were there trying to help the woman, not be so upset because she wasn't sure she could afford it. Yeah, this thing is a high level of spending, to say the least. Right? It's nearly more $4 trillion, because the only way they whittled it down was by whittling down the number of years, things such as the family paid leave and the child tax credit, which child tax credit is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? But let's understand that's about a 400 or 300 billion piece of a $4 trillion bill. But the other spending, in fact, this family leave thing, look, again, sounds fine, but now, if this passes, and that's still a long way to go, anyone can get 4 weeks of paid leave, paid for by the taxpayers, and if it's a distant cousin that you never met that lives in Canada, you decide to go to Canada for 4 weeks because some distant cousin is sick, there are no really eligibility requirements in it, no guardrails. So think of the fraud that can come with that as well. So that's problematic, and of course it disrupts business. Of course it will disincentivize work, and that's part of our problem. We have over 10 million people right now that are not working that absolutely could be, and hopefully that changes around, but not when you have disincentives like this, part of this bill. And then some of the taxes, there's $400 billion in taxes on small business. Now, why would you tax small business? We want American made. We want people to buy American. We want to fortify and empower our domestic businesses, and yet that's who's being taxed. So that's just the beginning of what is in this. Hiring 87,000, it's the largest expansion of federal government ever, larger than the New Deal. They want to add 87,000 new IRS agents, and this is a real beauty, they want to add 330,000 people to be uniform members of the Civilian Climate Corps. So what are they going to do?
Yeah. Wow. I don't even, great answer. I don't know where to even start. So the lawyer in me kind of thinks this way. So first of all, we're going to be taxing people more to pay for these giveaways that right now can't afford to make their budget right now can't afford and will not be able to afford the energy crisis. The Democrats have always claimed to support the middle class, yet what they're doing is burying the middle class. Because a lot of these folks aren't going to be able to take advantage of family leave. And they're going to have, let me give you a quick example. I have a good friend of mine that called me the other day. He said, Chuck, I just filled my propane tank. And I've watched your views, and I've been watching your show, and the one about heat or eat and the winter we're facing, the crisis we're facing. Yeah. He said, I had filled the propane tank last winter, and I kind of ran out of last February, so I refilled it in February, and by April we didn't need it anymore. So the tank was 60% filled. So there only was 40% going into this winter to fill it back up. So I called the same company that just was here 8 or 9 months ago. They filled it up, the other 40%. The bill to fill the other 40% was 2.5 times what it used to fill for the whole tank. Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. Luckily, he has a good paying job, but and then you go to food prices are up 300 or 400%. Gasoline prices are up 300, 400%, going higher. Yeah. And now we're going to put more money into the economy, which will drive inflation to double digits.
And then the other piece, first of all, this bill also has taxes on natural gas, which will, of course, raise heating of your home. There is an assault on fossil fuels. Okay. Now, if we can understand the effects of climate change. We can cheer on the things such as solar and some green energies, but not at the price of causing damage, not just to our economy, but to families like the Biden administration and the Democrats in the House are doing to the energy industry, right? I mean, we can see the prices at the pump. We see gasoline prices nearing $4. In some states, it is over $4. Natural gas prices are going to go up. And now the Biden administration is actually contemplating subsidies for heating of your natural gas because prices are so high that they caused. So liberalism just makes itself worse exponentially. And then you have people like Jen Psaki, the President Biden's spokesperson, and others in the administration, his energy secretary, talk about how actually it's a good thing that gasoline prices are going up. This is how these people think, because it'll give you more incentive to go towards greener energies.
That's what they're really doing.
Right. But that's, to an extent, their plan. That's how they think, and American people need to realize this is a very, very backwards, harmful approach towards trying to make things cleaner. Not to mention fertilizer pricing going up, right, for our farmers, again causing meat prices and food prices to go up. So they really just have a very much of an upside down agenda here.
Right. Well, this comes in the face, and we're coming up to break now, and I'm going to save the meat of this till after we come back. But just as every progressive liberal left columnist, from the New York Times to the Washington Post to the other national sources, are coming out now saying, in the coverage of climate policy, wait a minute, Democrats, you're getting ahead of the car is getting ahead of the horse. We have to slow down. We need transition fuel. It's going to take 30 years of a transition fuel to get to a point, and even then, we'll need transition fuel, natural gas, clean burning natural gas for the future, and saying, this overkill of now, and as you said, incentivizing investments to get car companies to only build electric cars, by the way, most people can't afford.
If you make $150,000, you will, under this act, be eligible for a $12,000 refund when you buy a $70,000 electric vehicle. Okay, as well. And this is where the special interest nonsense comes in. As well, they've now included the state and local tax deduction.
SALT,
right? SALT. All right, it was at $10,000. So
80.
Get this, now it's at 80.
Yes.
So do the math on that. If you live in New York or California or New Jersey or Massachusetts, high tax states, if you make $500,000 to $600,000 a year, okay, at a 10% local and state tax rate, so that's $50,000. You now can, that $1 million house you own where you have a $30,000 property tax, that full 80 grand is now deductible, yielding you somewhere in the neighborhood of a $24,000 to $25,000 tax refund. So New Jersey and New York are going to get a $25,000 tax refund. My constituents who make $60,000 a year and have a, say, $5,000 or $6,000 property tax will get nothing.
You can't even make this stuff up.
Right.
Well, Dan, we're at break.
Okay.
Again, we're here today with our United States Congressman from the 9th Congressional District, Dan Meuser. And he is educating all of us about what just happened in the United States House of Representatives and the danger it portends flat out for working people, aside from party affiliation. I can't imagine a scenario that this will work out well. And as I said, this is coming flying right in the face of what's going to be record inflation, an economy that's growing at the slowest part in about between 30 and 40 years. It'll be a catastrophe for this country. And they're calling it Build Back Better. As I keep saying, it's a Green New Deal. It's a social welfare deal. And it's going to fall in the backs of a lot of middle-class people. So at any rate, we'll be back, and I'll offer some proof for these assertions for those that think I'm just spilling out a partisan rhetoric. We'll be back after these messages. The gathering storm clouds suggest major climate change, and I'm not talking about global warming. I'm talking about the Democratic Party, my old party. The issues they confront have reverberated even inside the party. It's no longer a dirty little secret. There is a fight raging now that may be transformational. The fight started at first between Democratic moderates like Senator Joe Manchin versus the progressive liberal wing of the party. Now, tipping the balance of power in the party, the liberals and non-radical progressives are joining the moderates as they understand the continued relevance of the Democratic Party is at stake. I'm a lawyer and live in a world where evidence matters. So where is it? The first exhibit is from former Democratic Treasury Secretary in the Obama administration, Lawrence H. Summers, who has been warning the Biden administration that there was too much unfunded money being put into the economy. Summers stated that the $1.9 trillion pandemic stimulus bill way back in March was way too large. He believes it is directly related to the historic inflation we face, which is still rising exponentially. He warns the inflation is not temporary and could trigger the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, which could trigger a recession. As bad as all that is for the Democrats, and worst of all, is the progressive overreach and the cultural wars that are being fought by the woke elites in the Democratic Party. When it's a distinguished liberal columnist, Max Boot, who writes for the Washington Post, starts sounding the alarm, maybe Democrats should listen, because so far they have not. Many will disagree with my personal opinions, I'm sure, so I'll give you Max Boot's opinion, and I'm quoting now. I recently visited my alma mater, the University of California at Berkeley, and got an earful from friends about the excesses of cancel culture, the unwillingness of many progressives to confront crime, above all the damage done by Zoom classes and mask requirements for young children. These are complaints from liberals in one of the most progressive cities in the United States. Democrats live in a dreamland if they continue to dismiss such worries as phony Republican attacks. Biden needs to attack the far-left activists who want to defund the police, boycott Israel, and divide Americans by race. He could start by criticizing what liberal columnist Jonathan Chait describes as the kooky, harmful, and outright racist ideas peddled by white fragility author Robin DiAngelo. That criticism is significant, substantive criticism from responsible liberals, which have thus far fell on deaf ears by the leaders of the Democratic Party. Once again, we're here with United States Congressman Dan Meuser, a friend of this show's, talking about what happened in the House last week and the danger it portends for our economy and the country. Dan, I still can't wrap my arms around this Build Back Better lie. Build Back Better would suggest infrastructure. That bill was already passed, signed into law, part of what we need. Road and bridges need to be rebuilt in this country. That's already into law. We already have that. So to take this social welfare Green New Deal bill and call it Build Back Better can be designed to only do one thing: confuse the American people that they're talking about infrastructure, which everybody needs, instead of talking about Green New Deal.
Build government bigger, that would have been a far better name for it. But you're right, the transportation infrastructure bill, and we've talked about this, had a lot of good in it. All right, I'm the first one to admit it. I was there as we were designing it. We handed it over to the Senate. Right. Some things were changed. The bill, at least 2/3 of it or close to it, is good. All right, there happens to be a $200 billion slush fund, and now I'm talking about the previous bill that passed, that Pete Buttigieg gets to work off of. But a good $800 billion of that 1.2 will go towards hard infrastructure. Good. So people might say, well, why did you vote no on it? Right? It was a very difficult vote for me. As a matter of fact, I was one of the last to vote on the House floor. But during the discussion and during the negotiation on that bill, when right at the same table, they're saying to their Democrat progressive colleagues, if you vote for this, we'll vote for the reconciliation, or the so-called Build Back Better. So if you vote for the D&I, then we'll vote for that. And I was not going to be in a position to facilitate that tax and spend bill. Right. And the other thing is, I just put it to people this way. If you're going to buy a plot of land for $12,000, and as you're closing, they said, oh, by the way, you need to spend another $40,000 on this swamp behind it, and I'm gonna charge you rent along the way, i.e. taxes. Yeah. Then it's a no deal. Right. So I'm actually, there's a lot of good that'll come from that T&I bill. Look, it's a core function of government. It's what we should be doing. And if that was standalone, I would have been a yes. Right. I would have been a yes when President Trump was there. I would have been a yes now. But when you tie it to what I think is in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 trillion in growth of government, and most of it wasteful spending, not all, most of it, no, I was not going to be part of that. Right.
There was an editorial I'm going to read from right now, New York Times, and the headline is, I warned the Democrats about inflation. The author of this editorial is a gentleman named Stephen Ratter, and he begins, and I'm going to quote some things that'll appear up on your screen. Here's what he starts with. Enough already about transitory inflation. Last Wednesday's terrible consumer price index news shifts our inflation prospects strongly into the embedded category. So one of the things that President Biden and the Democrats have been saying, oh, don't pay attention to that elephant in your living room. That inflation, don't worry, it's transitory, it'll go away, it won't be here in a few months. Well, now, according to a Democrat, by the way, Mr. Ratter, says that the consumer price index has now changed the category to embedded. That means it's going to be here for people. Mm-hmm. And the prices are up 6.2% from a year ago, the largest increase in 30 years. Then Mr. Ratter goes down. He says, how could an administration loaded with savvy political and economic hands have gotten this critical issue so wrong? Question mark. They can't say they weren't warned, notably by Larry Summers. Now, for those of you who didn't know, Larry Summers, before I continue reading, Larry Summers was the Secretary of, I believe it was the Treasury Secretary, under, not Donald Trump, under President Barack Obama. He was a Democratic Secretary Treasury, and he's the one.
And Chief Economic Advisor.
Chief Economic Advisor, and Dan, he was warning the Democrats, and I'm going to go on and say, they can't say they weren't warned, notably by Larry Summers, a former Treasury Secretary and my former boss in the Obama administration, and less notably by many others, including me. We worried that shoveling an unprecedented amount of spending into the economy, already on the road to recovery, would mean too much money chasing too few goods. Then he goes down and skips further. He says, the original sin was the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan passed in March. The bill, almost completely unfunded, sought to counter the effects of the COVID pandemic by focusing on demand-side stimulus rather than on investment. That has contributed materially to today's inflation rates. And then he skips down, and this will be the last section I read. So the administration, the Biden administration, should come clean with voters about the impact of its spending plans on inflation. Build Back Better can be deemed paid for only if one embraces budget gimmicks, like assuming that some of the most important initiatives will be allowed to expire. in just a few years. The result, a package that front-loads spending while tax revenues arrive only over a decade. Again, that's from an Obama administration cabinet-level official, the Secretary of the Treasury, warning the Biden administration, don't do it. All the way back to March, Dan.
Yeah.
But go ahead, your comments on that.
Well, I was just going to say, too many dollars chasing too few goods, absolutely. What's happening here is it's going to be exasperated from there. I mean, the 1.9 so-called rescue plan that they enacted.
Last March.
Yeah, last March. That was after last year we spent $5.6 trillion. Yes, under Donald Trump, but it was bipartisan. Right. We had shutdowns. We had vaccines we needed to develop. We had hospitals that were going broke. We had people not working, so we were sending relief. But when the Biden and gang came in, they decided that wasn't enough. And so they hit it with the 1.9 trillion. Inflation starts ramping up, as Larry Summers said it would, and now they want to double down from there. Right. All right, so it's a real problem, it's a real problem. And look, I guess both sides of the aisle are guilty of some of the lack of fiscal responsibility, but this is a serious issue. You know, when I came into Congress less than 3 years ago, our national debt was 19.6. Right now, it's 29.6. $10 trillion. And we're going to have a debt ceiling discussion argument coming up with the Democrats in a few months, or excuse me, in a few weeks.
Before Christmas.
By December 3rd,
right.
So a couple of weeks. And you know, they're going to be looking at numbers in the neighborhood of $35 trillion for a debt ceiling. And we're going to say no. And they're going to say, well, it's based upon what was spent already. No, then make it $30 trillion. We would be able to do that. So we'll see where that goes. And they're already in the Senate figuring out how they're going to work it out, hopefully. But the thing is, this is real serious stuff, this level of spending. And we've got to show a level of responsibility and an understanding of what our jobs are, right? Is our jobs to take care of every facet of society, or is it to create an environment where America can grow and develop? And yes, with safety nets. You know, we're a wealthy country, quote unquote, with the real safety nets, but not, you know, enabling equal outcomes. We got to be the country of equal opportunity.
Right. The difference between equality, which is in our Constitution and part of the framework of our founding, versus this new term of equity, which is to jerry-rig effectively outcomes. I see a wave coming that is just going to be changed fundamentally.
We saw it 2 weeks ago, right?
Oh,
we saw it.
Sure we did.
Saw it clearly. We saw that the people said, we don't want you to tell us that we're not in charge of our children. We don't like inflation. And the macros, as I put it, we don't like what's happening at the border. We certainly don't like what happened in Afghanistan. Of
course.
And we don't like the direction we're going in. And it was quite a reckoning for them. But many in the progressives, which run the Democrat Party, you know what their response was? We didn't do enough. Right. We didn't do enough of the spending.
Well, you know, it's an amazing thing. Unfortunately, Dan, our time is up. Thank you, as always, for being on the Volpe Report. Yeah. Again, we are here today with United States Congressman Dan Meuser, talking about the issues that we face in this country. And as I said, I sit here amazed from day to day what I see happening. But thank God the voters of this country, I believe, will put the country back on the right track next year. So at any rate, thank you. We'll have another guest next week at 10:30. News keeps happening almost daily, so we're not at a loss for guests. We'll see you next Sunday.